It's come to my attention that you don't know who I am.
Cate Blanchett, the 50-year-old Australian mother of four. She was born on the 14th of May in 1969 and has since become a force to be reckoned with in the acting realm and an icon all across the world. For this analysis, I've watched several feature-length films in which she is cast and have chosen a total of 5 films and 1 short clip to analyze. These performances are spread over a 19-year period, giving me the opportunity to analyze some real growth over the course of her career. Blanchett first made a name for herself in the Australian theatre before crossing over to film. This may mean that there are less films to analyze, but it certainly gives a better understanding of Blanchett herself as well as her acting style. So we must begin at the beginning. In 1998, where a 29-year-old Blanchett embodied Queen Elizabeth I. Her performance captures her own youth and process of maturation. Even at this early stage in her film career, and despite having been highly apprehensive about crossing over into film, Blanchett carries an ease and playfulness in her performances. She is able to walk on the tightrope between Elizabeth's political circumstances and her own personal emotions. This ability to balance vastly different or contradictory emotions is a trait that she carries throughout her career. In these earlier performances, however, there are very subtle coping mechanisms of overcompensation which shine through her younger self to anyone really looking and comparing to later performances. These are most evident in the amount of facial emoting and bodily gesturing she incorporates. But this high level of expression is another common theme in her acting and does not always feel tainted by a need to hide or try slightly harder than necessary. This mechanism can probably once again be attributed to her youth and inexperience on film sets. But instead of compromising her true theatrical nature in an attempt to make herself smaller for screen, she has crafted her overspilling emotional cup into a potent presence that does not seem to mind being called too much, as long as it remains truthful. Which more often than not, it seems to. Even at this early stage in her career, Blanchett already manages to have a highly developed internal world for her character, and an intensity which she carries largely in her eyes when Elizabeth is still. Blanchett does not seem to be an actor who has ever shied away from compromising awkward, difficult, or bizarre circumstances.
I have become a virgin.
She was already able to show small aspects of her growing versatility in this performance, which was pivotal for Blanchett as it set up the foundation for the rest of her filmic acting career. Her performance as Galadriel is probably her first highly recognizable role. Throughout the Lord of the Rings era, Galadriel remains largely constant in an atmosphere of untouchable stillness and wisdom beyond any mortal. She has a kind but firm demeanor and a captivating presence. Blanchett conveys this consistently in the way she carries herself, how she uses her voice, and with how gently it translates onto her face, which is already far less physically exerted in this role. The clip I have chosen, called The Mirror of Galadriel, seems to be the only moment of total deviation. Galadriel loses control for a moment and embodies her dark side fully. She is spellbound and completely taken over by the ring. Her changes in voice and body are apparent, but even in this change, there is slight nuance of fear. Blanchett takes this character from one extreme to the other and back again.
All shall love me and despair.
Once Galadriel regains control of herself, there is a moment of surprise and then relief, which is displayed gently once again by Blanchett's subtlety in her face. This character is a great example of how Blanchett manages to balance a then blooming versatility on the one side with a total consistency on the other. But either way, her dedication to her craft and her characters is hard to deny. Blanchett's role as Sheba Hart is, at least in my opinion, the most nuanced and complex character we have discussed so far. The genre of a film naturally influences the acting style implemented and the character portrayal. This film is very slice of life and thus calls for realistic and layered characters. Sheba Hart has her normal life as a mother, teacher, wife, artist and friend, but these are juxtaposed with her double life of mistress, victim, traitor and her violent attempt at retribution. It is in this role where it becomes evident that Blanchett is playing around with her theatrical way of emoting and developing it. The required jumping between vastly different emotional states and spectrums for this character was a good space for Blanchett to experiment with her own theatrical and filmic aspects and keep developing an authentic balance and style of acting. Here she was able to further develop her versatility as an actor and her ability to fully immerse into character as well as getting out fully. The confusion and acknowledged human condition of the character feels amplified by Blanchett's own experimentation and willingness to be vulnerable and make mistakes. Sheba Hart is in many ways a highly human portrayal of a character, with obvious flaws and quirks, with victories and failures, with logical reason and deep desire that ends up changing the course of her life and who she is. This role is a good example of another one of Blanchett's stronger capabilities. Highly nuanced and deeply developed emotional character arcs. Blanchett seems to dedicate herself fully to the moment, the now experience of the character, and build on these fully felt experiences for slow, shifting and believable character arcs. The viewer can feel and also understand who Blanchett's character is by the end of the performance versus the beginning. Each development and change in gesture or personality feel justified. Even if the shift is dramatic or seems out of character like it would for the end of this film, the truthful and present journey that Blanchett takes the viewer on leaves it all making sense. Although Sheba Hart is a layered character, she is in many ways a very average person, and the complexities she displays are quite normal complexities for a real individual. Of course, developing a character who seems like a real and normal person ironically takes a huge amount of work and skill. The full development Blanchett's characters tend to have speaks of her unconditional empathy she has for them.
Why did you do it? Because I didn't help you collect your cat?
Sheba's complexity and character flaws make empathizing with her, despite the worst, quite easy. This is due to the truthful immersion Blanchett displays through the character.
You bitter old virgin!
Carol is another highly nuanced character that plays many of the same daily roles as Sheba. Yet their demeanor, traits, and active responses to their situations are vastly different. The financial class and temporal positioning of each character affect them greatly. They both struggle with identity and existing while pondering at the meaning of it all. While Sheba is still going through her tragic midlife crisis, Carol is in the aftermath and has already moved on to feelings of acceptance and building anew entirely.
Invite me round.
Carol's character also feels more mature in the sense that she is able and willing to resist her desires when the stakes are high, and has accepted that the simplest things in life seem to be the most important. Things such as love and being true to oneself no matter what the world might say. Carol is a good progress point for how Blanchett's acting style has become more of a balanced amalgamation between theatre and screen. Blanchett does not feel at all like she is exerting herself to show presence in this role. The truthfulness and willingness to be still is captivating and shows progress. The kind of self-confidence in her ability and herself that Blanchett displays in her roles, particularly this one thus far, is a kind of confidence that cannot only be practiced in rehearsals, but must be lived daily within one's own life. This again reaffirming that how we live is how we will act, and that reality will filter through no matter what. In all of Blanchett's roles, both her presence and that of her character are felt strongly. She walks next to her character in all circumstances, not one in front of the other. Over time, this strength and depth of presence has become fuller and deeper as she herself has grown and matured. Carol is also a good depiction of how Blanchett carries the full worlds and emotions of her characters in her eyes. Even now, in this role where she is more comfortable with simply being still and being seen, there is always an energy and a presence to be felt within those she embodies. Blanchett does far less with her facial emoting in this role, and yet the presence felt in it is often even stronger and more captivating than previous characters. Carol is also in a way a person tormented by her own life and choices, but handles this with far more inner strength and being than with outer exertion or compensation. Each aspect of Carol's life is quite different, and yet somehow all of them still feel truthful. This allows the viewer to identify with Carol because of the internal immersion work that Blanchett has put in.
I love you.
Manifesto is a very different film from anything else mentioned previously, and likely different from what most actors have been in.
And we're warning you! It's us who are the murderers of all your little newborn babies!
Blanchett plays every single major role in this film, racking up a total of 13 characters and one puppet.
Or abandoned with great contempt like a piece of shit.
All of the dialogue is created from various manifestos from across the world that originate filmically, politically, or otherwise, meaning that none of the dialogue makes sense in regular or daily life. Yet Blanchett manages to embed meaning into the words regardless, meaning that often has nothing to do with what is actually being said, which in itself creates a dual meaning that amplifies the message of the filmmakers.
Incandescence of my electrically charged nerves.
In this film, Blanchett truly gets the opportunity to play and extend her imagination to the fullest without much consequence, since the characters have such limited screen time. Her theatrical and filmic selves go head to head while she switches accents, genders, classes, nationalities, and mental states.
Purge the world of intellectual professionalism and commercialized culture!
Her physicalization and vocalization technique and skills steal the limelight. She makes many small and large changes to her stance, posture, vocal tone, vocal pitch, volume, amount of gesture, and kind of gestures to create each character. She still maintains her matured presence even when exaggerating an aspect of herself or her body for a character. Blanchett also plays on stereotypes, making most of the characters instantly identifiable and thus creating a basis of empathy for them despite their limited screen time. Because narrative is out the window with this film and she is the only main face seen, identification and empathy occur more directly with her as a capable actress and a person than with any individual character. Blanchett often breaks the fourth wall and many other staple rules of acting as part of the film's playful, political, and viewer-challenging nature. Blanchett shows that she is unafraid to look unattractive in several of these roles, and her acting itself feels like a statement completely aside from the filmic intentions.
Now, nothing is original.
Quite easily, it's more than 80% of the film that composes just of Blanchett, but it remains highly engaging, evocative, and poses questions and statements about the real world in the mind of the viewer, making it quite a filmmaking feat.
And at the cost of any good taste and any aesthetic considerations.
The acrobatic acting variety and complexity in this film alone could have taken up this entire analysis.
We, of whom you believe yourself to be the judges, will one day judge you.
In Thor Ragnarok, Blanchett gets the opportunity to be the villain. Hela is still, however, a much simpler and flatter character compared to most of Blanchett's other roles. The filmic superhero genre has a large influence on this, since the genre has in more recent years become fond of the humorous anticlimactic technique of bathos. This is where a moment of serious build-up is ruined by something menial to create comedy. This seems to be partly because the genre has focused in on entertainment and CGI polish above all else. Of course, this directly affects the acting and does leave Blanchett room to play, but in quite a selective and often surface-level way. She does seem to make the best of it and take it for what it is.
Want to see what true power really looks like?
Blanchett is not even present for large portions of the film. She is animated or comped into the scene. However, for the moments she does actually have screen time, she still brings her presence and gives life to the character. This film is a good example of how an actor may have to extend their imagination beyond the green screen and still tackle a role with full force. The fact that this surface-level acting and amount of imagination required to pull off a role like this does not throw her acting ability, energy, or presence off is within itself an achievement. This is another example of a more consistent, somewhat more physically demanding, and less emotionally intricate character by Blanchett. All that being said, this character still appealed and resonated with millions. Blanchett made the moments she actually had worth it and was not deterred by external factors or what appears like simplicity of the character. Her enjoyment and consistency in playfulness is felt, which is largely what will matter at the end of the day, since that is where most of this character's truth lies. She enjoys being powerful, she enjoys being the evil villain, and she enjoys being present within the moment and the character.
So simple. Even a blind man could see it.
This film is an example of Blanchett's dedication to versatility and remaining present with the character, even if it might not be what others would consider intricate or interesting enough. Blanchett shows here that suffering is not needed for craft or art. Sometimes simply enjoyment is enough.
No more anything. No more anything. Nothing. Nothing.